Hello, everybody. Welcome to this very special, very last minute show. Hope everyone's all right. Hope everyone's doing well. My stream is looking good. I am using the brand new version of YouTube Studio just launched today. And they've updated quite a few things, actually. It is much quicker to get set up. And it is much easier to get set up, especially if you're reusing stream keys. They've made that very, very clever and very quick and easy now. So that's very, very cool. And the information that you get as well as your stream goes on is much better as well. Excuse me. So I am running a little late, so I apologize because I was working late and needed to help finish up some bits and pieces at Presonus. But yeah, that's why I am a little late getting started. And then kind of just as I was wrapping up a meeting, Jonny messaged me and said that he had to duck out of tonight's show for an undisclosed reason. I don't even know what's going on. So I'm sure all will be revealed when Jonny's ready to, but yeah. So it's just me tonight. So Jonny and I actually had planned after last week where we did Fascinating Rhythm, which was all talking about syncopation and that kind of thing. We had planned to, hey, we've done a show on melody. We should maybe follow rhythm rather. We should maybe follow that up with doing a show on melody, a show on harmony, and that kind of stuff. Kind of going back to kind of what we did maybe a couple of years ago, where we did a series of live streams where we looked at the elements that go into making up your song, and because it's always good to go back and take care of the basics and remind ourselves of the basics, not just in terms of how we actually put our songs together, but kind of the theory that kind of explains why those things work. Jonny is fine. There's nothing serious going on with him. He just something came up very last minute, like about 15 minutes before. Yeah, no, maybe about half an hour ago. Yeah, about half an hour ago, he messaged me to say, "Hey, not going to be able to do the show tonight, and because I got to get out of here." But he said he'd let me know what's going on, and I guess we'll find out. But he said everything's okay, so we're all good. So nobody has cause for concern or alarm. Everything is okay. He just can't make it tonight at the last minute. So yeah, so we had already planned that we would talk about the different elements of what goes into a song and what makes music work. Kind of like framework on, lifting the engine, lifting the lid on the engine, taking the engine apart, stripping it apart, and figuring out what all the parts are and how you put them back together and what makes the engine work and how to make it work more efficiently. That's kind of what we had in mind. But obviously tonight we can't do that because Jonny's not here. And really, I want to have him as included in these shows as possible. So, if he does have to duck out, then we have to replace the show with something else so that when he's back, we can just pick up and we don't have to repeat shows. So there you go. That's the story. Mika says, I have cause for concern, won't go into it. Yeah, don't worry about Jonny. Everything's okay. Everything is fine. And it has nothing to do with previous shows. So just so you know, nothing to worry about. Yeah, exactly, Kyle. What is this carburetor thingy? Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of what we wanted to do. And so we will pick that up next week. And tonight I thought that we would just make this kind of, because this is a last minute thing, we just make this a bit more of a kind of songwriting Q&A. So normally on a Sunday, I have my Sunday Night Live, which is a bit more of a broader show where it's all about kind of everything that goes into music production and you guys asking your questions related to anything to do with music production. Well, tonight I figure, why don't we just kind of like just keep it focused on songwriting. So you can ask your questions, and it can be anything to do with songwriting. We can talk chord changes. We can talk changing key. We can talk time changes, tempo changes. We can talk melody writing. We can talk lyrics. We can talk rhyming schemes. We can talk character and plot development and all of those kind of things. If you are a narrative style songwriter. If you're not really a narrative style songwriter, then, we can look at other lyrical approaches as well. So we can do all of that tonight, and we'll go on for as long as you guys want to, within reason, given that it's after midnight here in Scotland, and I don't want to still be talking to you at 6 o'clock in the morning. So there we go. You guys were in well ahead of the show. So news has traveled fast, which is excellent. That's what I wanted. So let's go up to the top here. Sonic Tsunami Productions says, hello, woke up to a blanket of white on the ground. Eyes about popped out my head. Okay, so either somebody has stolen all of your city's supply of salt and or sugar, or everybody suddenly has, there is like an epidemic of dandruff, or you have snow on the ground. Now, given that it's kind of like the middle of April, snow in the middle of April these days, certainly with climate change and things, is becoming a little bit more, it kind of happens a bit more. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, we would have gone, that's just weird. And maybe kind of now we still kind of think it's maybe a little bit weird, but it is happening more and more. Certainly in March here in Edinburgh, you can pretty much say, hey, spring has sprung. No more snow. Winter is over, and we can just wait for the next one. And damn notifications. I forget to do this every damn time, don't I? And you know what the worst thing is? The worst thing is that I forget to turn them back on. There we go. Notifications off. There we go. So yeah. Climate change is going to kind of make those kind of weather events a little bit more freaky. Just Bob is here, who says, hello Lollipop, at least you weren't in that 50-car pileup this morning. Oh my gosh. Good grief. That's scary. Let's see, who else do we have here? Kyle is here. Kyle says, I noticed that the federal government has deposited my virus incentive into my checking account this morning. Awesome. That's good news. I've heard that from a few friends and colleagues at Personas as well. They've got theirs, so that's pretty cool. Let's see. Budbox Guitars is here. He says, hi all, what's happening? It's telling me the show starts in 7 hours time here. Yeah, I kind of had to hurriedly set it up, so I just kind of randomly clicked the time. You guys know when the show starts. It always starts at 6 p.m. Central Time. Okay? Wherever you are in the world, go and look at a world clock and work out what that means for you in your time zone. But it is always 6 p.m. Central Time. Every time, okay? Every Wednesday, every Sunday, when Jonny and I do our shows together. And when, every Wednesday when Jonny and I do our shows together, and then every every Sunday when I do Sunday Night Live. I can't speak anymore. Let's see. Carl says we're way ahead of me. Yes, you guys are. Let's see. HHG2G. I'm not quite sure what that is, but it's a BBC TV production. Yeah, you know what? A lot of classic BBC TV shows were awesome. You're talking about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yes, I have seen that just recently as well, actually. It's been on a rerun here in the UK. It's fantastic. Love it. My neighbor says, was a little surprised when I got a notification that JL was live. Yes, I only do this on a Wednesday if the show is on my channel instead of on Jonny's. And that is just the way that is. Let's see. Mika is here. And Michael Johnson is here, which is awesome. Let's see. Thomas in the Philippines is here. Good to see you, my friend. Welcome. And Ken Moss. Ken says, "Hi, Johnny. Sorry I missed Sunday Night Live, but my wife was cutting my hair, and at the time that was more important. Couldn't stand how long it got." You know what, mate? Consider yourself lucky that you don't have as little hair as I have, actually. You have a full head of hair. That's awesome. I wish I did. Yeah, it's been about 10 years probably for me since I actually had a full head of hair. And I don't really miss it. I really don't. Cal says, "Have had snow on Easter on a number of occasions." Yes, it is, as I say, becoming more commonplace. It's a strange one. Budbox says, "Wait until it starts growing out your ears and nose faster than your head." Yes, exactly. In my case, it's my eyebrows. I don't know if you can see, but my eyebrows are ridiculously hairy now. And they never used to be. But it is just what it is. All right, let's get to songwriting questions, folks. It's great having chat, but I want to get to songwriting questions. Because that is why the show is called Songwriting Simplified. So... Michael says, "Speaking of hitchhikers, I purchased a product at work called Device 42 to assist with some aspects of my job. I got curious at the 42 in it and asked them if the name was inspired by the book." Awesome. Dwayne is here. He says, "I'm watching whilst eating dinner. I hope you're enjoying your dinner, my friend." What did we have tonight? We had roast chicken and roast potatoes, and it was awesome. We were supposed to have it on Sunday, but events on Sunday kind of went a little bit pear-shaped, so we ended up not having that. Let's see. And that's it so far. No actual songwriting questions. Okay, well, if there are no actual songwriting questions, I guess this is where we end the show. After 15 minutes. We're probably going for the record of the shortest show that we have ever had on Songwriting Simplified. Mika says, "I hear the unibrow is coming back in style." Yeah, only for convicts, escaped convicts, or that kind of thing. All right, Mike Neighbor with the first question. "When writing bass lines, can you give some pointers to spice it up a bit and not make it so boring?" Yes, I can definitely do that. Okay. Let's take the reverb off. Okay, so bass parts can be as simple or as complicated as you want them to be. You know, you can be Jaco Pastorius, or you can just be Mr. Plods Along at the bottom end of, you know, who's really kind of like a slightly less than average guitar player, but you really don't want to kick him out of the band because he's been in the band longer than you have, even though you now run the band. So you give him a bass and say, "Here, play this." So it can be as simple as Okay, Just Bob, I will get to that question in just a minute. Thank you for pointing that out. Appreciate it. So it can be dead simple. That's really simple. All you're doing is just playing the root notes in a slightly percussive and rhythmic manner. So you can spice it up without really changing any of the notes. You can just stick to root notes, especially if you're not really a particularly good bass player. And you can change things up by doing two things. Number one, change up the rhythm. You know, instead of going instead of doing that, maybe do something like this. You know, a little bit of interest in rhythm can really help. So maybe your verse is nice and simple. And then in your chorus, you add a little bit more motion by having a little bit more of a syncopated rhythm, going back to last week, syncopation. Okay, so rhythm can be totally all you need to change it up between verse and chorus in a bass part and actually make it a little bit interesting for the bass player to play rather than just which, you know what, when you're you're doing lots of takes, that can get a little bit boring. And the last thing you want is the bass player to play like they're bored, because trust me, you'll end up with a really boring bass part, even if you capture it really well and the quality of the recording is really great. If the performer is bored of your bass part, it will sound boring, and there's nothing you can do to fix that. There really isn't. There are no plugins that will change something boring into something exciting. Doesn't work like that. So, give the bass player some interest, either rhythmically or melodically. So how do we do that? Well, you can do that by allowing the bass player to have a little bit of melodic freedom by maybe a little bit of stepwise motion. So instead of just going dun, 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 going from the C to the A, how about a little passing note, maybe using the B as a passing note, dun, 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 and then do the same between the, going down to the F, maybe dun, 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 something like that. Okay, and that provides a little bit of melodic interest, but you're still keeping it simple. You're not anywhere near kind of Jaco Pastorius yet. You're not really anywhere near Paul McCartney yet, in actual fact. So yes, rhythm, a little bit of stepwise motion with some passing tones that are diatonic. Notice those were diatonic because they belong to the key. Okay? Okay, all of those were diatonic to the key of C major. You can also use chromatic passing notes as well. So instead of going dun, 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 down using the B as a passing tone into the A, you can go dun, 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 okay, so you can use little chromatic notes either from below or above your target note. Okay, and this is really helpful if, for example, let's say you're doing kind of like maybe a nice sort of shuffle tune, a shuffle blues tune. And, you quite like the idea of, kind of like an upbeat on the right hand of the keyboard. So, kind of like that. Maybe it has maybe a little bit of a ska feel to it. Something like that. So what's the bass player doing there? The bass player is just spelling out the notes of the major chord. That's a little bit more interesting, okay? And all I did there was just use stepwise motion. When I went to the A chord, I went C, and then A, spell that out, use that C sharp as a passing tone into the D, and then just walk down the D7 scale. So D, C, A, F sharp, G, A, B flat, B, C. So a little bit of chromatic passing tones running up into the C again. Okay? So you're creating a little bit of a walking bass line. And walking bass lines are actually not that hard. You're just using chord tones and passing notes between the chord tones or between the tonic, the root note of each of the chords. Generally, if you're going to do walking lines, it's a good idea that on beat 1 of each bar, you are hitting the root note. So if you're going from C to A, like we did there, 1, 2, 3, you can go 2, 3, 4, 1. So I've landed on the A for beat 1. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4, 1. All right, so you're always hitting the root note of the chord on beat 1 of every bar. It's always a good practice. Now, obviously, it's not a rule, because you will find that really, really good bass players don't follow that, and they don't always hit the root on beat 1. So, if you have a really good bass player, and you can just give them a guide part and say, go have fun with that. And bass players will love you for that, to be honest. Alrighty, so that's kind of a good bass playing question. Ken says, is most walking bass based on half-step leading tones? Yes, but not always. And I'll tell you why it's not always half-steps. Because otherwise, it gets a little bit boring. I'll give you an example. Way. All I'm doing there is leading tones. C, C, but then I'm changing to the A chord on beat 3. So I'm doing 2 chords per bar. So B flat leads into the A, C sharp into D, A flat into G, B into C. And that's the bass line to the first 8 bars of the Muppets Show theme tune, which I'm not going to sing because I'll get a copyright strike. But yeah, so it can be leading tones, but after a while that gets a little bit boring. So again, you can use stepwise diatonic motion or chord tones, so you can spell out the chord. So, spelling out the chord was what I did for most of that. And then kind of like the last little bit there was a bit of stepwise going into some leading tone at the end for the turnaround. And that's kind of much more in a kind of, straight up what we would call a shout or jump blues, or if you're kind of like in a 1930s big band context, although you probably wouldn't play quite that chromatically in that context. But you might. Depends how traditional you're going to be. All right, let's go back up to the 607 question, because I said I'd get that one. Go find it. Okay, how do you write a solo that tells its own story within a song? Take guitar for the wreck of the Evans Fitzgerald. Good question. Solos, improvised solos should tell a story. And I'm assuming you're talking about an improvisation within the context of the song. Probably for me anyway, one of the best soloists at telling a story has to be tenor sax genius Michael Brecker, because he could tell a story in 8 bars, and it's absolute perfection. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end, it has thematic development, it has every element of composition within those 8 bars. And he was a genius at just standing there, you hit record, and he blows it, and it comes out absolutely glorious, and you go, that's a keeper. And it's maybe the first take. But Michael was a very humble guy, and he would maybe say, let's do another one. So he'd maybe do 3 or 4 takes, and pretty much guaranteed that the producers would just use take 1 with Mike, because he was that good. The solo that I would ask you to go and reference in this kind of regard, would be Donald Fagen's Maxine from the Night Flight album, 1982. Go and listen to that, because actually from a songwriting point of view, it's a beautifully crafted song. Not just that he has taken 1950s songwriting techniques and songwriting devices that were popular at the time, and used them exceptionally well, which he has, but he's also set improvisation within the context of a very, very tightly arranged song. So there's obviously the tenor sax feature, which is over the chord changes of the first half of the verse. And Mike Brecker's solo is absolutely glorious, and you should go listen to it because it's absolutely heavenly. But there are other little bits of ear candy that go on throughout. So there's Larry Carlton's guitar, and he just plays some absolutely beautifully placed little guitar licks that are just, they're just sweet and perfectly positioned within the song. And then you've got Donald on Hammond organ, and there are some nice little tasty phrases there, and there are some swells. So the Hammond organ is not in for the whole of the song, but it kind of comes and goes throughout the course of the song. And it plays a beautiful role within the song of kind of like, it's almost like it's an anchor. It's something that comes back over and over again within the song. It's an element that just keeps coming back. And it's beautiful. But if you're a drummer, it's got to be, Ed Green was the drummer on that session. It's got to be the easiest session you've ever played in your life. Because it's just a 12/8 beat. Dun, 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 dun. That's all he gets to play all the way through, apart from maybe a couple of little really simple fills. But it's so simple, so basic, and yet it utterly serves the song perfectly. And whilst that song is harmonically very complex, when you listen to it without really understanding that kind of harmonic language, it sounds really, really simple, and it sounds like it sounds completely improvised, and yet it's as if he has pushed it beyond improvisation and into something else. It's a brilliantly crafted song, and I always recommend that. Let's see, what else do we have? Michael says, if it is a 4/4 song, it can be interesting to change the bass line to triplets. Yeah, triplets can sometimes fit. Depends on the style of the music. Excuse me. It depends on the style of the music where the triplets will fit. Kind of if it's kind of like a nice tight little funk thing, ding, 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 then triplets probably not going to fit that well there, because you'd be talking about going from 16th note kind of funk thing, and then going to it may or may not fit. It can fit if you use it maybe sparingly as kind of like a little way of pulling the listener slightly out of time and then snapping them back into it. Triplets can be effective in that respect. Does the bass always have to be in line with the kick drum? No, not always. Although in rock music and in quite a lot of pop music, but not always, it's a good idea. It's a good idea that the main functional harmonic, the main harmonically functional parts of the bass part are right with the kick drum. So whenever you are on the root or the fifth of the chord, nail those with the kick drum is always a good idea. There are exceptions to the rule. In fact, there are lots and lots of exceptions to the rule. In fact, there are quite a number of songs where actually the bass and the kick drum are actually against each other. And that is a device of tension within itself. And that can provide some ear candy for the listener to get their note and add trills or hammer-ons to give it a boost. Yeah, you can certainly do that, but the thing with bass playing is to know when to be decorative and when to not be decorative. Because it can be very tempting to be, if you're a guitar player and not really a bass player, it can be tempting to be decorative all the time because, for a guitar player, the context of playing single lines is in a lead context. So your temptation is going to be to play something very melodic. That's not always going to fly with a particular song. It's not always going to fit. There are some contexts where that might work. But for the most part, you want to kind of be spare with what we would call your fill-ins on the bass. Like I personally, as a bass player, I tend to kind of leave mine to kind of like end of phrases. Because the other thing that the bass player has a role in is not only laying down the law rhythmically and in terms of the tempo and in terms of the pocket, where the pocket for the groove is. The other thing that the bass player has to do is kind of be able to signal and outline the structure of the form of the song. So when you're about to go into the next section, the bass player can kick it up a little bit with a little run either up or down into the next chord change. Or maybe just very occasionally, I mean, some songs, it works where you can do a little bit of slap and pull, throughout the song. Some songs really lend themselves to slapping. But sometimes, even on a song where it's not slapping at all, I will occasionally just let I'll have a little pop at a string every now and then. It's a little percussive effect, and it just provides a little change of texture. So those kind of things can be good. If you've got a bass player that can do those things, then you can ask them. You can say, hey, can you spice it up a little bit with some of these things? I don't know why I did that, but there we go. Talking about dogs. Okay. That's interesting. Just Bob says, yes, solos take on a life of their own, separate from the narrative of the song, but nestling without distracting, actually help build the story and the feeling. Yes, absolutely. It's kind of like, there are some plays, some of them by Shakespeare, and movies that kind of have adapted some of Shakespeare's devices. One of his devices was to have a narrator. So, or a chorus. And what are the chorus? A chorus are a group of people who narrate kind of the in-between parts of the action that you don't actually see. Or provide some context, or provide some explanation to what you've just seen, what you've just witnessed, and how that's going to impact upon what you're going to see next. Or keep the audience engaged in what's coming next. So a guitar solo, a saxophone solo, a trumpet solo, they can all have that effect. You only have to, excuse me. Another good song for you to think about in that context would be Dire Straits' Your Latest Kiss. One of my favorite songs of theirs, actually, because it does feature Michael Brecker, but it also features his brother Randy Brecker on trumpet. And the song opens with electric piano and trumpet, played by Randy Brecker. And they play this little melody in a much slower tempo. And then it kicks in with Omar Hakim on the drums and I think it's Chuck Rainey on bass into the main section of the song, although the bass doesn't come in until a little bit later in the intro. And the intro is a melodic figure played by Mike Brecker. But, given the fact that Mike Brecker could play from one end of the horn to the other with incredible power, incredible speed, incredible dexterity, he was fluent in harmonic techniques that nobody else had invented yet. And he was fluent in those. He could play the saxophone faster than anybody else. And yet he was capable of, if you listen to the outro of that song, you get to hear Mike kind of take a little bit more of an extended solo as the song really slowly fades out, and he captures the emotion of the song. One of the things he was really good at was capturing the emotion of the song. But the solo itself is really, really simple. It has really simple melodic ideas. So, he could... Yeah, Latest Trick, that's what it's called. Not Latest Kiss. Latest Trick, yeah. He could play with bewildering, dazzling speed, and, with a real advanced harmonic palette. And yet, on that outro, he could play something really simple, really beautiful, really perfectly placed. And actually continue to tell the story of the emotion of this song as it fades out. It's a brilliantly written song, Your Latest Trick. It's actually a really sad song if you check out the lyrics. And it's very poignant. And I think both Mike and Randy, really in their instrumental features, really eke out the most emotion from the story. Randy's role was to set up the story with his trumpet solo, and to kind of start off by playing this little hook. And it's one of the best hooks I've ever heard. I wish I'd written that hook, damn it. It's a beautiful, fantastic little hook. So Randy starts it, and then Mike picks it up. And this little hook, Mike keeps bringing back over and over again. And then when he plays on the outro, it's the hook that he starts with. And then he starts developing that hook thematically and melodically. It's brilliant. It's just genius. Genius! And very likely he did it in one take. Damn it. But yeah, it's a fantastic song. And you know what? You can totally, whenever you listen to that Brothers in Arms record, and it is probably, my opinion, the best record that Dire Straits ever made. You can kind of forgive Mark Knopfler's limited vocal prowess, shall we say, because he's a terrific songwriter, and he's a great guitar player. Although he also played on a Steely Dan record. I think he was on Gaucho, on one of the songs from Gaucho, and let's just say it's not great playing. But I think Mark was kind of, he was on vacation when they were recording, and they pulled him into it. Can I play the hook first? I'd love to play the hook for you, but I will get done for copyright, so I can't. I'm really sorry. You guys are going to have to go and research these for yourselves after showtime. That's unfortunately, one of the drawbacks of doing this on YouTube is that I can talk about the song, but I can't play it because I will get a copyright strike. Speaking of copyright strikes, if you guys were around about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, when I first did the first Sunday Night Live where I started to write a song in front of you guys, and I just had that drum loop. You may have seen that I posted all over social media how angry I was that I had got a copyright ID claim on that video because of the drum loop that I used. And I thought, damn it, I'm going to protest this. I'm going to dispute this claim. Guess what? They dropped it. They dropped the dispute. So I was given full liberty to monetize that video again. So yay, it does work. Sometimes if you know you're right, disputing a claim, you can win against the big fellas. So, just in passing, I thought I'd let you know. Because I was just like, yay, that's quite a result. Very pleased with that. So yes, I would love to play. I'd love to play all those Dire Straits hooks. In fact, that song, Your Latest Trick, was in my set actually with my band for a long time. We used to play it. I did a stripped down, almost acoustic version of it. It wasn't quite acoustic because I was playing a Fender Rhodes. But I had Fender Rhodes, and my bass player would switch to an upright bass, and my drummer would just switch to playing with brushes, and the horns would go and sit down, and we just have the just two of my horn players, my trumpet player and my sax player. They played the hook parts and everything else. And then what we would do is, the way I arranged that song was I had my guitar player who would be off stage, and he would be playing Mark's little lead guitar parts, and then he would kind of, about halfway through the song, he would actually walk on the stage and join us continuing to play. So we took the guitar and we kind of made it a little bit more of a feature than it is in the original song, just to change it up a bit. Bob Box Guitar says, I guess we're lucky it hasn't got to the point where you'll need to put tape over the logo on your tea mug. Yeah, you've got a point there. That will not happen. For obvious reasons, because I work for the company, so they're not going to do that. So there you go. Ken says, strike up one for the good guys. Yes, absolutely. That's exactly the way I feel about it too. But yeah, they did put me through the hassle for probably what was ultimately a matter of pennies. You know, they're fighting over pennies. It's ridiculous. And at the end of the day, I made next to no money out of that video. In fact, no. Correction, I made exactly nothing out of that video, monetization-wise. But it is what it is. Just Bob says, in a band of 4, guitar, bass, drums, and vocalist, who's in charge of the tempo, bass player or the drummer? Bass player. Or is it shared between the two, depending on how a song is written, tempo changes and stuff? Yeah, it is a little bit context-based, but I would say 99 times out of 100, the bass player is in charge of laying down the law, not the drummer. I know that kind of sounds like it's a surprising thing that in a rock band, you'd think, hey, the drummer lays down the law rhythmically. No. The bass player lays down the law, and the drummer provides the color and the backbeat. That's the drummer's job, to provide the backbeat. It's the bass player's job to lay down the foundation, lay down the law. That's why the bass player needs to have a good, solid grasp of rhythm, melody, and harmony, because he has to be able to play all of those on his instrument appropriately. And this is why bass players are so rare. Good, especially good bass players are so rare. Because, there are lots of good bass players who have a great sense of rhythm and a great solid pocket, but they have no sense of harmony. And they sure as heck don't know anything about melody. You need to know and be solid and have solid foundations in all three disciplines to be a good, solid bass player. So yes, the bass player lays down the law, the drummer provides the percussive colors and the backbeat. However, there are some songs where the vocalist has to lead because the vocalist, maybe there's a little bit of free time involved. And when there's free time, you defer to the vocalist and you have to just kind of accompany the vocalist. When I'm working with a vocalist here in Edinburgh, she is a fantastic singer. Her name is Heather. I've worked with her for 15 years, more or less. And I play piano for her sometimes. She has another piano player that she works with as well. But I play piano for her sometimes. We do a lot of jazz standards and stuff. We do Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, the Gershwin Brothers, Rodgers and Hammerstein, and all of those. We do all of those kind of songs. And really my job is to follow her. So if she decides she wants to up the tempo a little bit, I have to go with it. And it's just the way it is. Or if she decides she wants to take the song just a little bit slower and maybe a little bit more slinky, I have to go with that too. So I have to be flexible and I have to listen to what she's doing. And that's just the way it is. That's how it works. Let's see. Yeah, Deirdre says, I would agree. I've seen a few sideline, but a good bass player stays forever. Yes, good bass players are very, very important. Let's see. Ken says, and sometimes do a drum solo on the bass like my brother does. Yeah, well, here's the interesting thing about me as a bass player. I don't often talk about me in this way, but I started out as an upright bass player. So I was playing on upright bass, doing walking lines and that kind of stuff. And then I got into funk, and I saw Stanley Clarke and got into slapping and that kind of thing. And so I got a fretted electric bass, a fretted jazz bass, a little bit like the one that sat there, except the fretted one I have is it's kind of like got a champagne-y kind of sparkle finish to it. And so anyway, I do a lot of slapping on that kind of thing. So if I want to do any kind of like 70s or 80s funk, kind of late 70s, early 80s funk, then that's what I do. That kind of stuff. I'll do that all day long on my fretted bass. And I did that for a long time, a lot of slap bass. And I learned some interesting little techniques for that from watching Mark King videos, because back in the 80s I got Mark King VHSs and I would sit and I would learn some of his slap methodology, and then of course I discovered Jaco Pastorius in about 1986, which is a real shame because the year later he was dead. Sorry, he had died, just the year before. And so I was just like, damn, I've just discovered this guy, bass genius. And so I was just like, I would like to play like Jaco Pastorius, or at least I would like to, kind of take on board some of his influence, some of his ideas, some of his concepts. So being the upright bass player, I got this guy. Actually, not this one. This one I got in 2014, but the one before it was similar, almost identical. And I got that. And it was fretless. And I was just like, yay, I'm back on fretless. No more frets. Yay, back to that. And that's where I've been ever since. And I don't really think I'm ever going to go back to slapping, particularly. I mean, I do it from time to time. If I get a client that sends me their song and they say, hey, can you slap on this? I'll be like, oh, okay, all right, if I have to. And so I will. I'll slap crazy and send it off. But, I don't like doing those that much these days. Robert Plank was great at free-time vocaling. Yes, he was. He actually had a really great sense of time. Like, for him, time was kind of elastic. He could stretch a phrase out way over the bar line and always snap back to beat one. It was amazing. Lots of really great singers can do that. Sarah Vaughan could do that. Ella Fitzgerald could do it. Billie Holiday was the undisputed queen of time and tempo. Amazing. Bob's Guitar said, it's crazy. Apparently any melody you care to think of or come up with is copyrighted. Whatever happened to writing music for the pleasure of playing and sharing it? That's not entirely true. It's kind of half true. There are true elements to that statement. But if you think of a melody and you sing it, like if I was to think of a melody in my head and sing it into this microphone right now, that melody belongs to me. It does not belong to YouTube. It does not belong to anybody else. It belongs to me. And being that is the premiere performance, the very first performance of that melody, that belongs to me. And if somebody starts taking that melody and using it somewhere else, maybe they sample it and use it in some kind of weird bebop, jazz, EDM, trance metal song, then I can say, hey, that's my melody. And I can tell you that that's my melody. I can prove that that's my melody because I sung it on Songwriting Simplified on Wednesday the 16th of, Wednesday the 15th of April, 2020. And here's the video. This proves that that was my melody, and you stole it from me, you thieving swine. And they will go, okay, yep, fine. So that can happen. Mike Neighbor says, as a drummer, I always followed my bass player, but it was easy for me to do since Pete was an unknown Cliff Burton. Well, there you go. Yeah. A good band will have an absolutely awesome, solid, tight, dependable, metronomic bass player with a good, solid drummer who has a really big, broad pocket, who has a backbeat that you can rely on, and who plays with command and with authority. And that combination with the bass player locked in together, you have a great combination and a great foundation for any music that you want to make. Dietrich says, we are trying to come back together as soon as we stock up on Bengay and Geritol. I'm not really sure what you're talking about there, but there we go. Not swine. Oink, snort. Yes. Schweins. I could use, being that I'm from Scotland, I could use far ruder words, but I'm not going to do that because I would get into trouble. Carl says, we had a drummer who was jazz trained but loved rock. I'll start that again. Carl says, we had a drummer who was jazz trained but loves rock music. Well, that would be me too. I'm jazz trained, but I play most styles, to be honest. Because to be a session drummer in London, one of the toughest places in the world to work as a session drummer, you have to be able to play in at least 40 or 50 different styles very, very, very competently to a very high level with authority and command. Those things that I talked about. You have to do that. So, whilst my background is bebop and, playing extremely high tempo music, at least 320 beats a minute, I play that all night. I play on that ride cymbal all night, 340, 350 beats a minute without breaking a sweat. And yet, the next session, the next day after doing that, I would be in a studio where I'm playing 4 to the floor disco, which is fine. I enjoy doing that. That's fun. That's a kind of different kind of fun. Or I might be playing straight up, rock. Or I've played on metal records as well. And it's just a different style. It's just a different language. Well, it's music is the language, but it's a different dialect. All of these styles of music, they're all just the same thing. It's music. It's just they are different dialects of the same language. It's like we all speak the same language. We just speak with different accents, with different dialects. And each accent and each dialect has its own slang, its own vernacular, its own swear words. Yeah, bet you didn't realize that music has swear words. So, there you go. Let's see. Andrew Farmer is here. Hello, Andrew. Good to see you. You're kind of in right towards the end of the show. He says, and doesn't need a click track because God did not create us with perfect timing. Yes. Yeah, even the best drummer, even somebody like Bernard Purdie, who is probably one of the finest session drummers that has ever lived, even he used a click track when he needed to. There's nothing wrong with click tracks. I know that there is significant debate as to whether you should or should not play with a click track. Sometimes if you're playing with electronic elements in the music, play with a click track. You're going to need to, because you're going to have to keep up with something that does not lie, that does not waver. It is right there on the beat. And if you're slightly out, you'll know about it because it won't move, but you do. And you can't say, no, it's that click track, it's that backing track we've got. It doesn't. No, you can't say that because it is doing its thing perfectly every time. The only people that move are the human beings. So actually, when people say, oh, learn to play properly, that way you don't have to have a click track. Nonsense. Actually, playing with a click track is far harder than you think. It really is. It's not just about, this is a whole rabbit run that we could go down. But, I've played with a click track both in the studio and live. If I'm playing a gig and the band that I work with is using sequenced elements within their sound to fill out the sound of the band, then play with a damn click track. Do what you got to do to make the music. Does that mean that because you're using a click track that therefore you're any less of a musician? No, because it's a different discipline. If you can't do it, then you will struggle with working in those particular genres. There are musical forms that are performed live where you absolutely do need to play with a click track. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's genre specific. Andrew says you just have to lay back on your fills. Yeah, but you know what? If you're playing with digital elements and you lay back too much on your fills, you will sound like your drum set is falling down the stairs. And your fill will just come off as sloppy and untidy. So, if you're playing with digital elements or synthesized elements or elements that are triggered from drum pads, like loops that are triggered from pedals or drum pads, those kind of things, you got to play with a click track, man. And you got to be right on top of it. And that is a musical discipline. And it's just as valid in a live performance as it is in a studio setting, my opinion. But there we go. Anyway, it is after 1 a.m. here. We have been going for an hour and we have had some really good questions. Some actually surprising questions, which is nice. And, we talked about bass playing. We talked about, a little bit of kind of the bare bones of harmony and that kind of thing. But this is a really good show. A little bit bass-centric maybe, but it was a good show. So I'm going to say a very big thank you to everybody for coming. You guys are awesome. Hang on. Okay, not to worry. All right, so, sorry, I got distracted by something that came up on my screen there. So, yeah. Have yourselves a great evening, and normality for Songwriting Wednesdays, Songwriting Simplified, will be restored next week. In the meantime, check out Jonny's shows coming up tomorrow and Friday, and then Saturday you are Jonny free, and then on Sunday we're back here for Sunday Night Live. So until then, folks, I will see you very soon. Good night. Good night, everybody.